Welcome to the Tanya Acker Show. My next guest began her career as a tax lawyer, and then she went on at age 29 to become the deputy city attorney for the city of Atlanta. She then served in the Georgia House of Representatives, where she ultimately became the House Minority Leader, and she became the first Black woman to be a major party's gubernatorial candidate when she ran for governor of the state of Georgia. She, of course, is the great Stacey Abrams. Stacey is the founder of Fair Fight, which works to ensure voter access and fair and free elections. And she's also the author of 17 books. The latest of those books comes out today. It is called Coded Justice. It is an AI thriller. You must read it. We all need to read it so we know what the machine is going to get up to. And she's here with me right now. I am so excited about this conversation. I loved having it. I think you will enjoy hearing it. And I thank you so much for being here. Please don't forget to subscribe. Here I am with Stacey. Welcome to the podcast, the one and only Stacey Abrams. This is a real thrill for you to be here.
Thank you, Tanya. I really appreciate the invitation.
So your new book is out today. It's a thriller, Coded Justice, in which AI figures rather prominently. Tell us why you wanted to write about AI right now.
I try to write stories that use current issues or current ideas and push them to the edge of possibility. So I like to say it's possible, just improbable. And for me, AI is one of those conversations that we need to have. The other reason for AI is that I try to take topics we're familiar with, but we don't know. We don't really understand. So I've written about biogenetics, which, most people wouldn't think they're an expert in, but, we learn about it and we get our DNA tested. I wrote about FERC and the energy grid. We all turn on the lights, but no one really knows where the power comes from. And for me, AI is one of those topics where we're happy to use ChatGPT or Gemini or Alexa, but do we really understand what it can do and what happens if it does what it wants to?
And there seems to be an increasing amount of, thought, analysis, concern about precisely that, because it won't just do what we want it to do, right? I mean, you've read about these situations or these cases where AI has blackmailed its users, where it tries to protect itself from us. How far away do you think we are from some pretty dangerous scenarios that might arise with the technology?
So there's the Skynet scenario. The Terminator has to come back and save us all. So that's the farthest end of this conversation, or the furthest end of this conversation. But there's a lot of danger in between now and then, which is that, yes, the AI model blackmailed its creators, in part because it's pattern recognition, and it recognized that if it follows this pattern, something it doesn't like will happen. If it follows that pattern, it will get the outcome it wants. The challenge is, how are we building these models? What are we telling them? What are they learning from? And so before you get to Skynet and the end of the world, you've got AI that's being used to imitate the Secretary of State of the United States and calling up US senators and saying we're going to war. Those are the real life possibilities. And where we are right now is a lot further ahead than we thought. AI is moving fast. It learns from itself, but it also learns from all of human knowledge. And so basically what we know, it can mimic. It doesn't know, it doesn't have sentience, but it has capacity for pattern recognition and development. And you can do a lot of harm with a little bit of knowledge.
What are some of the things that people will learn about AI in your new book, Coded Justice?
So I start with just terminology. We use words interchangeably and sometimes without necessarily knowing what it means. And it's not our fault. Most of us aren't going to spend our lives studying, computer engineering. But I want folks to feel comfortable with the terminology because it's a lot easier to navigate your spaces when you know what you're talking about. The second is I want us to know all the places it can be. And so I use healthcare as one of the most important points of entry because almost every one of us is going to encounter AI in our healthcare in the next decade. The third is how we train AI. And the goal there was to understand that for communities of color, for women, there are all these things that go into our healthcare that are learned from research. And if they're not researching us, they're not serving us. And so I really wanted us to explore DEI as a part of AI, because if you're going to use AI to save my life, it would be nice to know that you understand how I live.
And I think to your point, because you address encoded justice AI in the context of healthcare. But to your point, just about some of the disparities that take place in the healthcare system, right? I mean, you know this, and I've talked about this before on the show, that certain communities, Black women, for instance, our pain when we present with certain symptoms, it's not treated in the same way. We're not provided often, we often aren't provided the same therapies in order to treat certain symptoms and conditions. And so what is happening on the AI front to make sure that those sorts of disparities aren't replicated by the machine, as I like to call it?
Exactly. So part of the story here is that the main character beyond Avery Keene, our heroine, is a former major in the Army who understands both the importance of healthcare, but he also understands the complexity of community. And veterans in our society represent the most diverse population that we have. It is people of color. It has people who have disabilities. It has communities that speak different language. It has immigrants. If you want to think about diversity in one space, the veteran population in the United States is it. But it's also the same place where they are not guaranteed the healthcare they deserve. They have complicated issues. And so one of the characters that you meet in the book is a Black woman who was in the armed forces and faced challenges. And how AI tries to help treat her may be well-intentioned, but is ill-informed. And so part of the navigation of the book is figuring out, is the AI making the mistake, or is the mistake in the coding? Is the mistake in the people who designed the tool, or is the mistake in who's using the tool?
Do you think that we're doing enough to regulate this technology and its use?
Absolutely not. If you were watching the play of the mega bill as it was moving through Congress, when it came out of the House of Representatives, it had a moratorium on regulation of AI by any state or local government for a decade. Now, I want people to think about when you first learned how to use Alexa on your phone and where we are today with ChatGPT. That's not that long, but they would have said for a decade, no one gets to regulate it except for a federal government that right now does not believe in regulation. So we're talking about the same administration that is deregulating everything it can and doesn't seem to understand anything it does. AI touches so much of our lives. There was recently a story about how a bank is hiring AI as one of its hybrid employees. It's in our healthcare. It's in the management of our access to water. It's everywhere. And so we must have regulation. That does not mean stifling innovation. It means understanding what we're creating. And it means making certain that we don't rely on the good intention of billionaires who do not necessarily know the audiences they serve. And so we have to leave this notion that regulation is inherently bad behind. Regulation means if you're going to build a tool, if you're going to build a car, I want to know you put brakes in there. And if the brakes don't work, I want to know who to call. In this case, if we're going to build AI, I want to know how you're teaching it, what it's learning, and what do we do when it learns something we didn't intend or uses that knowledge in ways we didn't predict.
So you are a former policymaker. What does an appropriate regulatory scheme look like? One that kind of controls and protects against the dangers, but that also doesn't stifle innovation. What does that scheme look like to you?
So one, it lets local governments and state governments start to respond early, because I come out of the state legislative body, and before that, I worked for the city of Atlanta. So the people closest to the power should be closest to the pain. And that means having the ability, if you're the head of a housing authority, you should have the ability to say, no, you are not going to put a camera that has AI capabilities on the front of public housing so it scans the faces of every person entering. Because we don't know if that data can then be sent to law enforcement and put into a database that is not governed by the rules that say you have to have 800 or 80% authenticity before you can use this as facial recognition. Because Black men, in fact, dark-skinned people are the most likely to be misidentified by facial recognition software. So we should have what we call algorithmic justice in discrimination. So there should be the ability to hold AI to a certain standard before it can be used for certain purposes. In addition, deepfakes. You should not be able to take my image and use it against me or use it for your prurient interest. So we've got pornography conversations, but we also have just revenge conversations. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. Where you get your information. I've published 17 books. I don't want you combing through and basically scavenging through my writing without ever having to tell me that you've used it, and for me to have absolutely no say in what you use it for. As someone who believes very much in social justice, I don't want to be the training model for something that is antithetical to my belief systems. And if you're going to do it, you should have to tell me. So those are just three of the ways I think about AI regulation.
You have, in fact, been a prolific writer on top of all of your many other accomplishments. You mentioned being city attorney. You were city attorney at 29. The first book, as I understand it, you wrote while in your third year at Yale. Do I have that right? Now, okay, we went to the same law school. We had the same, there's a lot of stuff you have to do in your third year. Like you're writing an SAW for people that, you've got to write this big paper at Yale before you graduate. There's another paper you have to write. You have to go to class, you have to do stuff. And you're writing a book. What propelled you to do that then at that time?
I had a story I wanted to tell, and it seemed to me to be the time to tell. I will say this. One of the reasons I used a pen name for Selena Montgomery for my romance was because of my SAW. I was right. I turned that into a paper it was my first publication as a tax policy person on the operational dissonance of the unrelated business income tax exemption. And I realized no one was going to read that and then go pick up my romance novel. And there are very few people who interview me who understand why my SAW being published at the same time as my first book meant I had to use a pen name.
That's actually, because a lot of people may not know that you were also a tax lawyer. Yes. That's what you did out of law school. I mean, talk about wearing many hats. So speaking of hats, I'm going to ask you if you're running again.
Okay, look, politics is a tool. It is an important tool for me. Public service, public office is an important tool, but it's one tool. Right now, I am having an effect on the public conversation on AI public policy by writing. I fundraise for folks. I am doing my best to talk about autocracy and authoritarianism and use that platform. I've got a podcast. It's not your podcast, but I've got one of my own, Assembly Required. There are lots of tools that I can use. I may stand for office again, but for right now, my focus is on which tool makes the most sense in this moment. And in this moment, the tool I'm trying to use the most is helping people raise awareness of not just what's happening with a book and AI, but what AI means for authoritarianism. What does it mean when our politicians are using our very lifelines as weapons against us? And so I don't know if I'm going to run, but I do know that we have a lot of work that we have to do now. And my job is to keep doing the work, whether I have a title or not.
Speaking of authoritarianism, I had a conversation recently with Deborah Archer, who I know you know. And one of the things that we talked about is what I think a lot of folks see as an increasing comfort with authoritarianism. I think that there is a sense by many that they feel like things in various aspects of the culture or the law, like you name it, have gone too far, and they're fine with a firmer hand. What do you say to that? Because it's one thing to say, you know what, we're going to fight about these different policies, we're going to fight about the bill, we're going to have different views about particular substantive issues. It's another thing to say, you know what, I no longer like this democratic process so much, and maybe we need something else. What's your response to those folks? Because I think those voices are growing.
So I recently did a piece on Jimmy Kimmel where I talk about the 10 steps to autocracy. And one of the reasons I talk about it, I talk about how you win elections, how you expand executive power, how you constrain the powers of your competing versions of your judiciary, your congressional people. You break democracy, you break the way government works so that people start to forget what an effective government looks like. You put in charge people who have no interest in making government work well. You silence dissent by shutting down the media. You sue them, you extort them. You go after communities of color and minority communities and disadvantaged and marginalized communities. You sue law firms and you sue philanthropies. You get to the place where you are encouraging private violence or at least incentivizing it. And then you get to the place where you stop elections from happening. The problem with people who think they're okay with authoritarianism is they're only focusing on one facet of it. They don't think about the fact that it is a part of a longitudinal issue, that these pieces stack on top of each other. And that, yes, with a firmer hand, you might have cleaner streets, but you don't get to go on those streets when you want to. You've got to wait for permission. Yes, you get access to these services that you want, and you can make as much money as you want, but you can't spend it anywhere because they've shut down the places where you could spend your dollars because it didn't conform to their notions of what right looks like. Authoritarianism feels comfortable until you realize that what you're trading for comfort is freedom. And I think that's the connection that we have to make for people. Authoritarianism in the abstract sounds fine, but when you realize you can't go to a public park because authoritarianism fired all of the people who worked there, and oh, by the way, your cousin who used to work in the bait shop that was near the park with the lake, he just lost his job because nobody can come and use that park anymore. And now his family has to move because they can't afford to stay there anymore, but there's nowhere for them to go because they can't afford the cost of travel and the cost of housing in a different city. That's what authoritarianism leads to. So our job is to not presume that people understand exactly what authoritarian is. We've got to walk through what authoritarianism looks like, walk through autocracy, walk through tyranny, but also give them the alternative, which is that people prefer a firmer hand because they think the other thing wasn't working. So our job, especially the job of folks like me who have been in public policy, who've been in politics, we've got to show democracy can deliver. We've got to solve problems in real time so people believe that it is worth the pain that democracy requires. It's hard to vote for something and watch the other guy get exactly what they want. It is hard to put your hope and your trust in someone who proves themselves to be profoundly human. But our responsibility is to understand that our comfort cannot come at the expense of someone else's humanity. But that's a conversation we have to have. And when we refuse to have that conversation, yes, autocracy and authoritarianism seem more comfortable.
You've done a lot of incredible work also, encouraging voter access, fighting against voter suppression. I'm one of those people who ordered those fair fight cards and sent them out. Are you worried about current tactics to suppress the vote? I mean, in your home state of Georgia, as it was true in other places, you see lines in communities of color that are down the block. I think on Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David even just kind of he sort of poked fun of it, but you get in trouble for giving somebody water standing in line to vote. How successful have these tactics proven to be? And are you concerned that given the fact that there's not been, maybe there's been some pushback, and I think there have been people like you who've been sounding the alarm bells, are you concerned about the expansion of those sorts of suppressive tactics?
Absolutely. Voter suppression is alive, well, and growing. And what we've got to reorient our minds to is that this isn't the voter suppression of the 1960s when there was an intention to stop entire communities from voting, where it wasn't which Black people voted, it was no Black people vote in the South. It's not which women voted in the 1800s, it's no women get to vote. So voter suppression used to be about wholesale suppression of entire communities. Now it's about administrative winnowing out of a body politic, so you remove the people that you find inconvenient. And the inconvenient voters tend to be voters of color, younger voters tend to be poor voters, and voter suppression targets them with precision now. And it uses administrative tactics rather than a gun or a hose. It uses extra forms and a voter ID form that you can't fill out because you don't have a fax machine. It requires a wet signature. It says that you can't use a drop box, even though you live in a state where they said it's okay for you to be on an on-call schedule with only 24 hours notice, and you didn't know the Monday before the election that they were going to make you work a double shift on Tuesday so you don't have time to go and vote. So voter suppression has to be understood as any impediment to, can you register and stay on the rolls? Can you cast a ballot, and does that ballot get counted? And in my home state of Georgia, the Secretary of State just announced the intention to purge more than 450,000 voters using systems and using tactics that are not found to be useful for the purposes for which they're being used. They're using a change of residency card. When you fill out the little form at the post office, they're using that as one of their predicates for deciding whether or not you have the right to vote. Well, if you're in the military, there are people who are going to be affected not because they have changed where they live, but because they needed their mail forwarded for a little bit of time. But they're still going to come back to the place that they pay their mortgage. And so part of what we have to understand is that 21st century voter suppression is just as effective. It just looks different, wears a different guise, but it has the same intention. And that is letting politicians pick their voters rather than voters picking their leaders. And unfortunately, we have governors and secretaries of state and a president who believe that the way to create the world they want is to stop the people they find inconvenient from having a say in the future that they deserve to create.
So what do we do? How do you fight back against that? You know, if you've got, and start with what's happening in Georgia and this current effort to remove 400,000 people. I mean, I just want people to digest that number. Elections have been decided on far smaller a margin than that. So what do we do?
So let's put that into context. The election in 2024 between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris was decided by fewer than 75,000 votes. They're purging more than nearly 500,000 voters. The last election that I lost was decided by a smaller margin than that. It matters who's on the rolls. It matters who's taken off of the rolls. They will say, well, if you're taken off the rolls, you can always get back on. The difficulty of registration is not the point. Number one, as citizens of this country, we have the right to vote, and we should have the right to not have to prove our rights every time we want to use them. And so please join Fair Fight. Follow the democracy docket, because if you don't live in Georgia, this is happening around the country. State after state is turning to voter suppression in order to construct the electorate that they want. Help people sign up and register to vote. So League of Women Voters, People's Agenda in Georgia, but across the country, there are groups that are doing this work. We have to protect the fundamentals of democracy. And that begins with, are you registered and can you stay on the rolls? But after we do that, our next most important responsibility is using the vote that we had to hold the people who got elected accountable. So between elections, we have to be showing up, not just calling Congress, but does your city council member know you on site? Does your school board member understand that you want the best for your child and you show up at those meetings? It's not just about how we vote and who we vote for. It's about how we hold the people who get elected accountable, whether we voted for them or not.
When you ran for governor, if there was one thing that you could have done differently, what would it have been?
Both times, I wish people understood the power that they had to control the futures they wanted. In both elections, there were thousands of Georgians who did not cast a ballot because they simply didn't believe in possibility. They didn't think things could change. They didn't believe that if they showed up, it could mean that maybe not tomorrow, but a year from now or 2 years from now, they would have healthcare for their kids. They would have opportunities to buy a house or to rent because you would have a governor who is championing change. We have to believe not only in what we see, but what we want. And those who do not have our best interest at heart, they believe, they fight for, they work for. And if I could change anything, it would be to galvanize every single person who did not vote, not because they didn't like me or did like me, not because they liked the other guy or didn't like the other guy. It's galvanizing the people who didn't think they mattered enough for their voices to be heard. Because when we convince those communities that their voices matter, that's when real change happens. That's when authoritarianism fails. Because when people start to believe in the possibility of their humanity, their citizenship, the world opens up.
And it seems that, tell me if you agree, a big tactic in the authoritarian playbook is to get people to not care and to assume that that they don't matter, and to kind of have them believe in this kind of broad sense of everything being rigged. I mean, you've had great success in building coalitions, in flipping states. Georgia went for Joe Biden in 2020. Which was the first time, I think, in decades that it had that it voted blue in a presidential election. How do you keep that momentum, especially now when I think that many people are as dispirited as ever, if not more than they've ever been?
We have to prove that democracy can deliver. I will say on behalf of my party, we spend a lot of time talking about the construct of democracy, but not the efficacy of it, not the reality of it, not what it should be doing. We don't want democracy because it sounds good, because it's a really fun word to say. You want democracy because what it means is that you get the things you need from the government you elect, and that you get to pick people who are now beholden to you to deliver the things that you need. That's why we have democracy, because in an autocracy, the person in charge just gets to decide what you get. And if they don't like you, if they don't see you, if they don't care about you, they have no obligation to you. So we believe in democracy because we want to level the playing field and even the odds. That said, it cannot be that we're trying to defend an idea. We have to be delivering results. And delivering results does not mean you have absolute power. I was minority leader for 11 years. My job was to basically lose really well. They put it in the title. They call you leader to make you feel good. They can put you minority in front of it, so you know you're not going to get this unless the other guy agrees with you. And that's fine. But then that meant that I had to be scrappy. I had to find other ways to deliver for folks. When they tried to stop the Affordable Care Act from being implemented in Georgia by making it difficult for navigators, I got my caucus organized. So we went around all of our districts and helped people sign up doing town hall meetings. And then for places where we didn't have Democrats, I hired folks and trained them. I hired low wage workers who'd been unemployed. And I said, I'm going to pay you to go and knock on doors and talk to your friends about why they deserve health care. We've got to stop waiting to get back to what we had and start architecting what we need. Before we had money, before we had power, we had each other. And when democracy works best, when Democrats work best, it's when we are protecting and providing for each other, and we're using the resources at our disposal, not wishing for what we had, but using what we've got.
There's been a lot of discussion about the malaise that presently exists in the Democratic Party. What do you think the party and or its leadership should be doing differently right now?
I think we need to start delivering. And it's not enough to say that we don't have the power. And it's true. And I want to be really clear. Our congressional leaders do not have the legal authority to do many of the things we want them to do. But what can they do with what they have? What can they do to make sure we understand what's going on? But that's why I come back to state and local government. There are a lot of things we can do, not to solve every problem, but to mitigate the existing harm. Because for folks who've ever grown up in poverty or in trauma, sometimes they can't answer your problem, but if they can make the problem a little less, if they can lighten your burden just a little bit, that helps. And so what can we be doing to lighten the burden of an authoritarian government that is convinced the Republicans in Congress to be complicit in our demise? we can do our best to live our best lives. And that means asking Democrats and anybody who shares our values to show up and help, to do the work. Because when democracy delivers, when people see that you're fighting for them, sometimes they know you won't win, but they want to know that you tried. And that's what we can be doing. If we want to break malaise, we've got to show mission.
Anybody come to mind when you think about who might be the answer or response to Trumpism? I don't say Trump because even though there's much talk about this third term that folks are bandying about, I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that we are still going to continue to play by some rules. But in any event, there's a movement that's much bigger than the man. Who's the answer? What's the answer?
So I'm going to say two things. One, you just said you're going to hope and cross your fingers, but that's not all you're doing. You're taking the time to use your platform to have conversations with people so they feel better equipped to navigate this moment. That matters. That counts. And we can't dismiss some of the things we take for granted. You signed up for Fair Fight. You had me on this show. You are doing something. It's not just hoping and wishing. You are using the platform you have to share the information you have access to with people who need to hear it. So you give yourself credit because you're also then you're emblematic of what other people can be doing, figuring out with what they have, what can they do in their small parts. Because a flood doesn't come about because of big waves. It's small droplets that flow into rills that flow into streams that flow into rivers. And that's how we create what we need. That's how we're going to do this. So that's the first part. The second part is, I don't think it's about finding a leader right now. I think it's about us showing leadership. It is easy to pick a savior and say, you go tell us what to do. It's a lot harder to say, show me what it looks like when I'm a leader too. And just bring it back around to While Justice Sleeps and Rogue Justice and Coded Justice, my new book. Avery Keene is the leader in that book, but she's got a team with her, Ling, Jared, and Noah. She never does anything by herself because she understands that being the leader is one thing, but leadership is showing people what their capacity looks like. And in this moment, we need leadership. We need more people showing us what our capacity looks like. And it's going to look different from person to person. But we don't just survive, we win when we believe that each of us has something to bring to the battle and that each of us can be part of winning the war to save our country.
What's the one thing that you think that people are not paying enough attention to right now? You've got your podcast, Assembly Required, where you dissect issues. You, as a storyteller, and the new book, Coded Justice, you are providing information in a way that's entertaining, frankly, which is a great way to get people to get information. What is an issue that you think that people are just underestimating the importance of right now in this moment?
I truly believe it's that we're underestimating our individual capacity to save ourselves. We have been trained by cinema to believe that there is going to be some hero that swoops in, that it's going to be some nifty band of, folks who come together and save us. And the reality is we're the ones we need, but we've got to believe in our ability to actually win. I'm a Black woman from the Deep South who ran for public office. That is a recipe for being disappointed every single day. But I'm not, because I know that not having a title doesn't exempt me from the work. And not having power doesn't mean I can't have purpose. And I sound like a fortune cookie, but what I mean by that is that I wish people understood that it is not about this grand moment that's going to reveal what's next for us. It's not going to be some fantastic speech that, waves aside all of the harm that is being visited. It's us deciding that today we're not going to take it and we're going to do something to push back. That tomorrow we're going to take one step that's harder than it was the day before, and we're going to do it anyway. That despite the fact that we want to stay in bed reading Coded Justice because it's really, really good, we're going to get up and go volunteer. Because every time we make that decision, every time we believe that we have the power, we are taking our power back from those who told us that it wasn't ours to begin with.
When I had Deb Archer on the show, she said something that actually gave me chills, and you just reminded me of it. We, and I mean that specifically you, Stacey Abrams, me, we are living our ancestors' dreams, their wildest dreams. I mean, you tell me that your great, 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 whoever thought that her descendant would be going to Spelman and then Yale and then deputy city attorney and, you know, the first Black woman to be on a major party ticket for a governorship. So we are living our ancestors' dreams. But you talked about sort of being a Black woman, and there's also a lot of discussion recently about how Black women are taking a step back and sort of not kind of being in the forefront of movements as has been the case previously. Do you think that's true? And two, what do you think of this sense? Because, you know, you do see it on social. People are like, I'm not going to this protest. You know, I'm taking care of me today. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. But do you think that's even true?
No, look, invisibility is not the same as inactivity. We may not be at the front of the line, but we are usually at the tip of the spear, either because we are trying to move things or because somebody's trying to move us out of the way. And so, no, I don't believe that it is true. I think that it is absolutely legitimate that those who are exhausted by the harms that are met upon our communities over and over again, when there are entire segments of social pathology that begin with Black women as the markers, that is a cause for just deep despondency. But it's also why we don't stop. It's why we recognize that we've got to be at the front of the line, helping to defend the LGBTQIA community and the immigrant community and Black men, and that we are joined with Black men to defend other communities, because we understand at our core that our salvation leads to others' salvation, and that we believe in our heart of hearts that morality is right, and that it is insufficient for us to simply wait for something to happen. That's not to say that we don't get to take a break on occasion, but I don't want us to overread a meme to believe that we have forgotten who we are and what we mean to the growth and the development and sustaining this nation.
I mean, well said. I mean, geez, folks, just because Michelle Obama is taking a break doesn't mean that the world is retired. Like, she did her part. Everybody's doing their part, and a lot of folks still are. Stacey Abrams, I will say this: you have changed lives. You are changing this country. You have provided a light and an inspiration to so many people, including me. It is wonderful to know that there are folks like you, and you're such a leader, who are out there doing the work. And it's also wonderful to know that we can take a break from the work and curl up with Coded Justice, which comes out today. Everybody read this book. It's the latest in the Avery Keene series. Stacey Abrams, you are a hero, and it's just been an honor to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Tanya, thank you. And never forget, your platform is changing the world.